this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Lowe's knows Sundays are for football, so tackle your home improvement projects by Saturday and earn your Sunday with great deals on LG and Bosch appliances, select Bounty and Swiffer cleaning products, and more. Then once your to-do list is done, get ready to kick back, relax, and enjoy the game. Shop in-store or online now and earn your Sunday with help from Lowe's, official partner of the NFL.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get chicken parmesan delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and this episode 1059 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Two announcements before we get started this week. First, it's Thanksgiving week, which means a different content schedule. You're getting this 15 Transactions episode at its normal time. And then tomorrow you get the 10 Trends episode at its normal time too. But with this Thanksgiving slate and with my own schedule, I'll be publishing the Sleeper Show on Wednesday as well. And then that's it for the week. Late Round subscribers will get the standard rankings and rankings updates on Patreon. All that stuff will still be there. It's just you're only going to get 3 shows in this podcast feed this week. Next week, we'll be back on schedule. And there's one more announcement that I want to make before I talk about these transactions. I made another hire, and I'm very excited about it. Last year around this time, I announced I was bringing on David Kitchen to be Late Round Fantasy Football's Chief Operating Officer. That was to help grow the business and allow me to focus more on creating content. This hire is to help enhance Late Round's content. I'm bringing on one of my old coworkers from Numberfire and FanDuel. He was my right-hand man for years there, Brandon Gadula. Brandon's going to be joining the Late Round team in January as a senior analyst. He's going to be helping me out with research projects, with enhancing my prospecting work, with the newsletter, with the guides, with offerings for subscribers. There's so much to get done. And he's 100% the right person to help because he understands how to research and he understands the type of content that I do each day with this business. Now, from your perspective, nothing's really going to change. You're still going to hear my annoying voice on this show. You're going to get the same analysis that you've always gotten. This is a hire that will simply enhance that existing content. And it's going to allow me to work on projects that I haven't been able to get to through the years. So there's more to come there. I just wanted to shout it out and let everyone know that the team is expanding and that we can all look forward to an awesome 2026. And with Thanksgiving being on Thursday, I'm really, really thankful for that. Now let's get to these transactions. Add Devin Neal and Taysom Hill. So Alvin Kamara suffered an MCL injury against the Falcons on Sunday. It's not a long-term injury more than likely, but we could see him sidelined for a couple of weeks. Currently, though, there's no timetable for how long he's going to be out. But with Kendre Miller already out for the season, rookie Devin Neal, he's going to have to step up and be the Saints' top running back. And honestly, I've said this in the past, but Devin Neal looked really good in the Zap model, especially for a day 3 pick. He has a 3-down skill set. Now, with that being said, there are 2 major things working against Neal. The offense is one of them because it's not very good. That's going to limit scoring opportunities. The other big problem is Taysom Hill. According to PFF, Neal played a solid 57 of a possible 66 snaps after Kamara's injury on Sunday. Taysom Hill was at 21, and 13 of those 21 came in the backfield. Despite that fact, Hill ended up out-attempting Neal on the ground 10-7. Now, when you look at these snap rates, I'm not sure that's going to maintain and keep up. I don't think we can assume that Taysom Hill is going to have more rush attempts week in and week out without Alvin Kamara than Devin Neal. But we know Taysom Hill is going to get some usage, and we know that usage will often come in the red zone. That's going to cap Neal's upside. So you can add both of these players. I think Neal's the more valuable piece because he's a running back and he's going to see more work overall. But Hill can work as a touchdown bet in your tight end spot. Just know that Hill's not seeing a lot of work through the air. He's getting less than a target per game. So there's far less PPR appeal with Taysom Hill. Buy Jalen Waddle. The last time we saw the Dolphins offense, Jalen Waddle finished in a plus matchup with 3 catches for 52 yards. Then the Dolphins had their bye. Now I understand that in a lot of leagues, trade deadlines have already passed. I get it. When you hear these buy and sell recommendations from here on out through the end of the fantasy season, it's also a confidence thing. You can know whether or not you should feel good about a certain player. And with Jalen Waddle, I would at least feel good. Since Tyreek Hill went down with his season-ending injury, Waddle's averaged about a 26% target share per game rate. That's really strong. Even with that down Week 11 outing, he's just shy of 15 PPR points per game without Tyreek Hill. So you're getting really good usage and really strong production from Waddle right now. But that could look even better given their matchups down the stretch. Waddle gets the Saints, Jets, Steelers, Bengals, and Buccaneers to close out the fantasy season. None of those teams rank as bottom 10 teams for wide receivers by adjusted fantasy points allowed. And his playoff schedule, it's Pittsburgh, Cincinnati, and Tampa Bay. Those are all top half matchups for wideouts by adjusted points allowed. So the usage is there, the production is mostly there, and the schedule is great. That's why you should be buying Jalen Waddle. Add Colston Loveland. We're going to talk about a lot of tight ends today. And one of the tight ends that we're not going to talk about is Darren Waller, because I mentioned him last week. So if Waller's still on your waiver wire, you can add him too. I figured I'd bring that up because I just talked about his teammate, Jalen Waddle. But let's move on to Colston Loveland. In Week 12, Loveland had a route share of 68%. That was his highest in a game with Cole Kmet this year. And that resulted in about a 17% target share. Loveland currently has a 1.76 yards per route run rate. Not only is that a whole lot better than Kmet's 0.97 rate, but according to PFF, it's a top 10 rate among qualified tight ends this year. And remember, Colston Loveland's a rookie. This is just like Luther Burden, and it's in the same offense. Both of those players have been really, really good per route run. And maybe we don't see everything come together this season, but the talent is clearly there, and we want talented players on our rosters. Sell Caleb Williams. It's been a really weird year for Caleb Williams. I don't even know if we have a clear-cut answer about him long-term. He's shown glimpses of being great, but then he makes some really costly mistakes. But if I'm just being objective, right now, he's dead last in the NFL in completion percentage over expected according to Next Gen Stats. Now, that doesn't necessarily matter for fantasy, and he's coming off a game where he scored 21.7 standard points. He's actually been a top 6 quarterback, top 6 pre-Monday Night Football to be fair, but he's been a top 6 quarterback in 3 of his last 4 games. Those games, though, they came against the Bengals, Giants, and Steelers. Those teams are comfortably top 10 opponents for quarterbacks when looking at adjusted fantasy points allowed. Moving forward, it's not going to be that clean. The Bears close out their fantasy season with matchups against the Eagles, Packers, Browns, the Packers again, and then the 49ers. They have one of the worst remaining schedules for quarterbacks. You may want to make other plans if you've been relying on Caleb Williams. Add Dylan Sampson. Look, we're firmly in handcuff season. And Quinshon Judkins, he was in the blue medical tent multiple times against the Raiders on Sunday. That led to Dylan Sampson hitting a 29% running back rush share. That was his highest since week 1. He also had a long touchdown reception, which led to 16 PPR points. Considering Sampson's 57% running back rush share and 19% target share without Judkins in week 1, if Judkins were to miss any time, whether this week or future weeks, Sampson could be worth a start. And Cleveland has one of the best running back schedules rest of season. Add Andre Iosivas. So Jamar Chase missed week 12 because he was suspended. And that allowed Andre Iosivas to hit a 90% route share and a 21% target share. Now Chase is going to be back this week against the Ravens, but T. Higgins, he's out. He suffered a concussion against the Patriots. That means Iosivas is going to be the number 2 option at wide receiver for Cincinnati on Thursday night against Baltimore. And Joe Burrow is going to be back. And for what it's worth, probably not worth a ton, but it is interesting. Last year, in 2 games against the Ravens, Joe Burrow threw for 820 yards and 9 touchdowns. So it's an interesting spot for Andre Iosivas. add Mike Gesicki. So another Bengal to watch out for on the waiver wire this week is Mike Gesicki. He returned from injury in week 12. He went right back to his pre-injury usage. Actually, you could argue that it was even better. He saw a 67% route share against the Patriots and an 18% target share. That was his highest target share of the entire season. Now, like I said, T. Higgins, he's going to be out on Thursday. Gesicki could be in store for more work just because there's one less body in that offense. But remember, Gesicki plays a lot out of the slot. Baltimore's been fine against tight ends this year, but they rank in the top 5 in adjusted fantasy points allowed to slot receivers. Gesicki's first in the NFL this season among all tight ends with a 73% slot rate according to PFF. So not only is there some potential usability long-term, but you can at least use Gesicki this week as a streamer. Buy Tyler Warren. If you'd rather not just stream at the position, you could buy into the position, and if you're going to do that, Tyler Warren's a really interesting choice. He's now failed to hit double-digit PPR points in 3 of his last 4. He did that in 6 of his first 7 games of the season. It really hasn't been a usage problem, though. His target share per game, it's technically higher over his last 4 games. It's just an effectiveness and touchdown issue. But the Colts have also faced the Titans, Steelers, Falcons, and Chiefs over this 4-game stretch. 3 of those matchups, they're bottom 10 matchups for tight ends by adjusted fantasy points allowed. Moving forward, things should be a lot easier for Tyler Warren. You know, up until this point in the season, Indianapolis has actually had the second toughest tight end schedule in football, according to my numbers. But just one of their next 5 games is against a team that ranks as a bottom half opponent for tight ends by adjusted fantasy points allowed. And that's coming in week 13 this week when they face the Texans. After that, it's Jacksonville, Seattle, San Francisco, and then Jacksonville again. Those are all top 10 matchups for Tyler Warren. Warren has a very real chance to do damage in the fantasy playoffs. Add Brenton Strange. This has been a pretty tight end heavy list of transactions this week. And there's more to come, including Brenton Strange. Strange came back from IR this past week against the Cardinals, and he more or less just played the exact same role that he was playing earlier this season. He had a route share of 71%, that's strong, and he had a 17% target share. Over his last 3 completed games, he's hit target shares of 18%, 23%, and then 17%. That gives you a shot at usable production each and every week. Just do be aware there's probably going to be a slight volume dip when Brian Thomas is back and healthy. Add Jaden Reed. I've talked about Christian Watson quite a bit over the last few weeks on the show. You don't need me to call him out as an ad. But Jaden Reed, I haven't talked a ton about. I did on a mailbag episode a couple of weeks ago, but let's talk about Reed for a second. Reed's 21-day practice window's opened. He should be back soon. And while his slot-focused role in Green Bay does limit his upside, that's what I talked about in that mailbag episode, the Packers are really missing a presence in that area of the field. Tucker Kraft tore his ACL back in week 9. In the Packers' 3 games since, Jordan Love's yards per attempt rate has gone from 8.3 to 6.0. And yes, that's a small sample. Clearly, other things are going to influence that number. But it does show that Green Bay's passing attack needs a little bit of help. And maybe Jaden Reed can be that help. The Packers get the Lions, Bears, Broncos, Bears, and Ravens to close out the fantasy season. The only tough matchup on paper for wide receivers there is Denver. But they've been pretty average against slot receivers. That's a tougher matchup for someone like Romeo Doubs or Christian Watson. So I think Jaden Reed at least has a shot to give you like wide receiver 3 numbers down the stretch if things break his way. Sell Hunter Henry. Hunter Henry managers need to be aware that week 12 was more than likely not the start of a trend. Cincinnati is absolutely terrible against tight ends. They've allowed by far the most adjusted fantasy points to the position this year. And with Henry's touchdown against them, they've given up 13 touchdowns to tight ends this year. That's 6 more than any other team pre-Monday Night Football. Henry had gone 7 straight games without a double-digit PPR point performance prior to that game against the Bengals. I highly doubt that Hunter Henry is going to be someone that you throw into your lineup each and every week rest of season. Add Raheem Mostert. So Ashton Genty has an ankle injury. Right now, it doesn't seem serious, but we know how this goes sometimes. Monday, everything's fine. Friday, they're placed on IR. Not to say that's going to happen with Genty, and hopefully it doesn't happen with Genty, but you never know what's going to go down with this kind of thing. Now, if Gentry were out, I do prefer Raheem Mostert over the other running backs in that offense. Zamir White would probably dress and get more work on the ground. There's that potential for sure. But Mostert's the one who's been dressing and getting some work in this Raiders offense this year, at least as a pass catcher. And because he's been deployed as that pass catcher, and because we know Zamir White isn't that much of a pass catcher, I would prefer Mostert because we know that this Vegas team is not very good. They're going to face some negative game scripts, and that's going to be more Mostert than Zamir White. So I guess you could look at White, but in PPR formats, in most formats, I'm going to lean towards Raheem Mostert. Buy Saquon Barkley. It's been a really tough year for Saquon Barkley. He's given fantasy managers only 2 top 10 performances in PPR formats after doing that 10 times in 2024. The Eagles' offense just isn't moving like it was last year, and Barkley's been far less efficient. But I'd bet you'd be surprised to learn that Barkley's running back rush share per game rate this year, it's 82% versus 81% last year. His target share is 14% when it was 12% last year. Now that's on less volume and less quality volume, but his backfield share remains really, really strong. That's what you have to latch on to if you were to buy Saquon Barkley right now. Because obviously, going after him, it's a highly volatile move. It's a move for more desperate teams who need that variance. It's just that we're at a low point right now. Barkley's coming off a pretty miserable game against the Cowboys where he scored just 12 PPR points. He's averaged just 11.8 PPR points per game over his last 3. The thing is, his peripherals in week 12, they were actually pretty good. He saw 90% of Philadelphia's running back rushes and a 22% target share. That's the first time that he's been an 80% running back rush share or better and a 20% target share or better this season. Now, the tush push is always going to be a problem for him, but Philadelphia's schedule is so good for running backs rest of season. It could simply set up more scoring opportunities. In week 13, they get a beatable Bears defense. Then it's the Chargers. And then in the fantasy playoffs, they get the Raiders, Commanders, and Bills. Those are 3 top 10 matchups for running backs by adjusted fantasy points allowed. Like, there's a serious possibility that Saquon Barkley is pretty usable during the most important weeks of the fantasy football season. Add the Los Angeles Chargers defense. So fantasy managers dropped the Chargers defense this past week because the Chargers were on a bye. But this week, the Chargers get the Raiders. It's a great matchup. They're 9.5-point home favorites, and Vegas has allowed the second most sacks in football this year. And according to my numbers, they've been the second best matchup for defenses by adjusted fantasy points allowed. So if the Chargers are out there, they're a phenomenal streaming defense. Add the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense. Now, the Chargers might not be available in your league, but the Buccaneers, they could be. They're out there in about 80% of Yahoo leagues right now. And as I talked about on this podcast in the past, they've got a beautiful stretch of games to finish off the season. Tampa Bay gets the Cardinals this week. Then it's the Saints, Falcons, Panthers, and Dolphins to close out the fantasy season. The Bucs defense isn't anything special, but those are all top 10 opponents for defenses by adjusted fantasy points allowed. At the very least, we'd be calling out Tampa Bay each week as a streamer. So it could be helpful if in your league, if people are hoarding defenses, to just have them rostered, because you hypothetically could use Tampa Bay every week from here on out. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are registering for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Thanks for listening, everyone. Like I said, the 10 Trends episode, it'll drop tomorrow, and then later in the day, you'll get the Sleepers episode. I'll talk to you then.
Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get chicken parmesan delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details.
This is Julian Edelman from Games with Names. As a fellow dude, do you ever get that not so fresh feeling in your butt? That's because you're probably using the dry stuff to wipe. Wet, extra large, flushable dude wipes get what toilet paper leaves behind in your behind. You wouldn't clean the tail end of your truck with dry paper towels. So why would you wipe with dry toilet paper? Wetter just cleans better. There are no more dingleberries, no more itch and irritation, just a deep, down the seam, confident clean. So don't fumble the ball with toilet paper. Stop being an a-hole to your b-hole. Drop the toilet paper. Available on Amazon and major retailers nationwide. Dude wipes, best clean, pants down.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.